You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, your weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today. And this is one that you have heard from before. She was here, I think it was the very first episode of January 2022. So we are doing a follow-up to chat about some different things. So I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself and tell you where you can find her online.
Awesome. It's so nice to be back. My name's Samantha Nagel, but I go by Sam. I'm the owner of Empowered Spirituality. I'm a certified health coach, and I do lots of spiritual community stuff. You can find me on Instagram as the easiest way. It's at empowered.spirituality on Instagram.
Well, I am so excited to chat with you today and talk about some different things because you have been up to different things since the last time we chatted. But first of all, I did want to say that you recently got engaged, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
Big life change for you. I'm very excited for you.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
That is wonderful. So
Yes.
besides that, tell me in terms of, witchcraft, what has changed since I talked to you last year?
Such a good question. I'm still working a lot with the cycles of my body. I loved that episode that you did with Leslie. It was a couple weeks ago for me. Still working with the seasons of nature, still working with the cycles of the moon. But actually, I think I really focused a lot on herbalism, which I know we'll talk about. And I've also focused more on goddess work. I think I briefly mentioned it last time, but I've been exploring more ancestry stuff. I found out that my roots are Celtic, which is interesting because that's where I've always felt a calling, spiritually. So I've been trying to work on my spirituality through that and connect with some of those goddesses like Bridget and the Morrigan. Yeah, but other than that, same old, same old.
I love that. I love to see what everybody is doing, how everyone is growing. Some things stay the same, but
Yeah.
then some areas just are completely new and different. So yeah, we are definitely chatting about herbalism today. That was going to be the main thing, but I'm sure we're going to touch on a whole bunch of other things. But
Yes.
so tell me then, since herbalism is new for you, kind of how did you decide to start working more in that area? And what does herbalism mean to you?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Um, I think I've always been drawn to it. Like I've always been drawn to drinking teas. I think towards the end of last year too, like last year, I was kind of into purchasing a lot of teas and having teas like on hand. And then I think it started by me realizing, hey, I could make tea really easily. Like I just have to buy the herb and then make it tea. And so that was kind of my introduction. And then I think it just kind of snowballed from there, where I realized I could make a lot of the things that I use. And then also how to harness those energies in just magical workings, not necessarily like something physical or tangible. Um, so, for what does herbalism mean to me? I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For me, I know that we talked about this when you were on my podcast. I do subscribe to the animism point of view where everything has its own energy and spirit. Um, so I think it's a lot of working with that plant's energy or its spirit or the magic that it has. And you can do so much with it, but I think that's like what it is to me at its core.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. I love working with herbs, and each one has its own sort of essence that goes along with
Mm.
that. And tea is easier than people think.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's such a good place to start is making your own tea blends because it is much easier than people think it is. I mean, not if you're growing everything from scratch, but if you're
Yeah.
buying the
Yeah.
ingredients, then yeah, making
Yeah.
your own tea blends is much easier than people think it is.
Yeah, and it for me anyways, it just feels good because I generally trust what I buy, but it feels really good to know that I know exactly that this is just chamomile in my tea. It feels kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's nice to like work with each one individually, like before you're
Mm,
putting it into the blend, and really getting the
yeah.
essence of each herb individually.
Yeah, that's something that I wish I did more of is meditating with plants and herbs. I don't really do that too often.
It's kind of a fun experience. I do like doing that. I wish I had more time for it, or I should say, I wish I dedicated more time for it because I
Mm,
have the time to do just about anything that I want. However, I just don't prioritize certain things. So that might be on my list. I feel like that's a fun thing to include more often.
yeah, I think so too. Kind of like how a lot of people meditate with crystals. I'd like to have that, like, oh, I'm just gonna meditate with this plant today. Like kind of a casual relationship like people have with crystals.
Yeah, absolutely. So besides tea, what else have you been doing and learning in this past year in regards to your herbs?
Yeah, I've been making a lot of tinctures recently, which I
Ooh.
also thought was really hard. You just have to kind of research it beforehand, but if you already know what you want to make, it's really easy. You just need, like, you can use apple cider vinegar if you don't want to use alcohol. Otherwise, you'd probably use an alcohol. I think you can also just use water, it just takes longer. So it's like, it's pretty easy and it's so much cheaper than buying a tincture at the herb store, which is pretty expensive. So that's something that I think I made too many tinctures. And now I'm like, whoa, I need to take a little
Now
break
I
from
have to use them
tinctures.
all.
I know. I'm like, when am I going to even have the time?
They are so fun.
I know. Actually, that's something that I really like. I had to scale back a little at the start of the year because I was getting overwhelmed by all the like teas and salves and tinctures that I wanted to make. So I had to be like, hey, this is just for me. Like, I don't need to work at an industrial speed. I can just have fun and take it slow.
Yeah, I just do not have the space to
I
store everything. If I was
know.
going to make absolutely everything that was on my list, it would just be crazy.
I know. And all the jars.
Yes, I am already. That's like one of my goals this year is like I have so many herb jars and it's on my goal list to work through them. Like I need to use up what I have this year before
Yeah.
just like adding more to the collection.
Yes, I'll take some of those jars off your hands.
I will hold you to that. There are just jars everywhere. I feel like that's like a sign
Yeah,
that the person's a witch,
I
right? There's just
know.
jars everywhere.
I know. I think actually you posted something like that when I
I
was
think I
on
did.
the
I think this is
newer
accurate.
end.
I still believe it.
Yeah, so I was like, I wonder what that means. And I was like, oh, I understand.
Welcome. Now you understand.
It's so funny.
So, do you have any resources that you recommend if somebody is starting down this path of herbalism? That's like books, or did you learn anything online, any courses?
Hmm. Actually, that's something I wanted to mention. When I first started, I felt like I had to get a certification. And I think if I want to like sell or like coach specifically around herbs, I think then a certification is worthwhile. But I kind of realized that everything, I mean, this is very general, but everything I feel that I would learn from a course, it's pretty accessible online. So yeah, I would just say if you want to start, you want to dive in, don't feel like you have to pay a lot of money to invest in this. There's so many people on all social media apps, on YouTube, if you just Pinterest things. But like a caution there is, of course, I think on TikTok, I've been seeing this a lot. Like people will say, oh, this herb is just amazing for this. And everyone's like, awesome, I'm going to try it. But you do have to do your own research. One resource that I like is drugs. I think it's just drugs.com. And you can see if an herb has any uh, what's it called? If it interferes with your medication at all, if it wouldn't be good for a certain psychiatric condition, if it wouldn't be good for a certain medical condition. So as long as you're doing your own research in that way and being like ethical, I think you can just kind of dive in on the internet. There's so much stuff out there.
Agreed. Do you have a two-part question. Do you have a personal favorite herb that you've been working with? And do you have
Ooh.
one that you would recommend for beginners that is sort of on the easier side to work with? I know a lot of them, there are some tougher ones that like can actually be poisonous. So like those would not be beginner friendly, but do you have any that would be like good for a beginner?
Yeah, that's funny. I think I'll start with the second one, the beginner herbs. I would recommend something maybe simple like lavender or chamomile or both. You can make a tincture out of both of those. You can make a tea out of both of those. You can use them for a topical product like a salve or even a lotion, or make an infused oil of them. Um, and I would still check, of course, but chamomile is pretty mild and it's probably not going to have a lot of interactions with what you're currently taking, but check, I'm not telling you. And I think actually my favorite herb right now is chamomile, which is interesting. I This is gonna maybe sound silly, but when I started my herbalism, I was like, oh, chamomile, everyone knows about that. I want to be cool. I like want to have some cool herbs that no one's heard of, which I don't know where that comes from, but yeah. But it's been my favorite. It's been like calling to me. I've been wanting to take baths in it and like drink it every day. So I don't know, it's like really calling to me right now.
It makes me laugh because I have said that on this podcast before that I do that too, where
Oh,
I like want to be different. Like I was way worse about that when I was a kid and like a teenager, that I was like, no, if it's like the cool thing, I don't want to do it. I want it to be the exact opposite. And like I have since grown out of that like very like stubborn, obnoxious phase. But there are times I do find myself like, no, everybody else is doing it. I don't want to. And I'm like, oh my gosh, stop.
I know. Even saying lavender, I was like, oh, that's a basic one. You know?
I find myself saying that and doing that all the time too, but it's basic for a reason. Like it's lavender is
Yeah.
one of my favorites, and like there is a reason for that, and there's a reason why so many people love it. Like it works, it's easy to work with. Chamomile too. I agree with you that it's
Hmm.
easy to work with, and it works. It works for what it says it's going to do.
I know. That's so funny. What do you use lavender for? Everything?
Yeah, just about everything. Lavender for
No.
me is stress relief and sleep for sure. Which I think is
Mm.
like its main association is what most people think, but it absolutely works for me. Like I have a pillow spray that is lavender scented, and when I use it, I
Oh.
am out like a light. Like it really is relaxing to me. It just the scent I associate with like spas and just
Mm.
a nice stress-free environment. So that is absolutely what I use it
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. I bet that wouldn't be hard to make too, right? A
No,
nice
no, not
spray.
not hard at all. I think people get the idea in their head that it's difficult and expensive, but it only
Mm-hmm.
is if you are like, you get too excited and you buy all of the things, which I would not blame you. I am guilty of that. But it doesn't have to be expensive. You can start with one herb at a time and really get to know that and
Mm.
learn and use up your stocks. But
Yeah.
it does not have to be expensive and it does not have to be that complicated because obviously there's a lot of complicated things you could do with lavender, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I've noticed this comes up especially with my partner. He thinks that or my fiance.
Yeah.
He always thinks that because I've made it homemade that it's somehow like less reliable. And I feel like that's a common thing that people think. And that could be true for some things, but I feel like it's more reliable when you make it yourself. So I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just something with purchasing that people associate with it being
Mm,
regulated or tested somehow, but that's not true. It is
yeah.
sometimes if you're buying from, a big pharma brand, but
Hmm.
there are very few regulations at the federal level for herbal remedies and essential oils.
Yeah.
There really isn't. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not any better getting it from a company. It's not that it just like was tested and passed all these things. That's not accurate. So I
Hmm.
agree that if you are able to uh, grow your own items or know the source for the items, I don't have a green thumb at all, so I can't I tried. It's not ideal. So I don't grow my own stuff, but I at least like try to know where it is sourced from. And then when I do all of
Mhm.
my own work with it, I feel it's a little more reliable than something that I would buy and I have no idea where it came from.
Right. I know. I think that was maybe a catalyst to getting into herbalism a little bit more too, was I do like supplements or herbal remedies. And I realized how unreliable it is to just believe that the product you're buying has what it says it does because it's not regulated.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a lot of big companies that will hide behind proprietary blend and not
Mm,
actually tell you everything that's in there. And I do
hmm.
not like that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fillers, which is what I learned about essential oils.
There really is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard. It is something I like to do myself as well.
Ooh, you make your own essential oils?
I do. It's not that hard once
Oh.
you have you have your favorites. I would not make essential oils for every single one because you need so much of the herb in order to do that.
Yeah.
And that would, for me, it's cost prohibitive to make 20 different essential oils. But my favorites, yeah, like my own lavender oil, absolutely. It's not as
Oh,
hard.
I tried to make lavender oil and it didn't work. I don't know what I
It's
did
not,
wrong.
it's all trial and error because it
Mm,
depends. There's like so many factors of your own like kitchen and supplies and what you have. So like following a single recipe exactly doesn't always work because you need to
mm,
experiment with like the tools that you have and like what are the temperature settings that you're using. It like differs
yeah.
for everyone. So but it's like once you have it down, then it's easy to replicate for other herbs.
Oh, that gives me hope. I'm gonna try it again.
You can do it. I am very confident. Like the more you learn and you can like sort of pinpoint where things went wrong. And then once you have it down,
Yeah.
it's down.
Oh, and that was what helped me realize why essential oils are so expensive because you do have to use so much herb to get so little oil.
Yes, you do. That is definitely the downside of it.
Yeah. So the $5 ones now I'm like, huh, how
Right?
did
You
that
question, you're like,
happen? Yeah, I don't know about that.
right, exactly. Well, I would love to jump into something that is at least new since the last time that you were here, and that is your Blooming Wild community.
Aw, yes. I'm having I'm having so much fun with it. I co-run that community with my friend Brenna. Her Instagram is Nature Tarot and she does tarot readings. And we just kind of wanted to do something together and wanted to make some sort of community. And so we made Blooming Wild and it's been really fun.
I love that because that's something else that we were talking about too, is that
Mhm.
idea of having a community and how hard that can be to find. And I think herbalism is one of those things where it can be a very solitary practice
Yeah.
and kind of isolating if you're growing everything yourself and you're hiding out in your kitchen. I mean, I love to do those things, but sometimes it's nice to, get feedback and learn why something you tried didn't work.
Mm.
Or, ideas of what to try next. And I feel like that's a great, what you're doing is a great place to sort of have community and find some community.
Aw, I love that. Thank you so much. I think one part of herbalism that has inspired me to have more community is when you do manage to get an essential oil, maybe not an essential oil, but when you do manage to make your own tinctures or your own tea, at least for me, anyways, I feel like I'm curious how other people perceive them or if they like them. So I really enjoy like spreading that with other people. And I think that's kind of where herbalism feels like community care. So I guess that's more how it would be in person. But then online communities like Blooming Wild, it is nice to say, hey, this didn't work. Like, how did you make your essential oil? And have people weigh in. That's really cool.
I love that you have that community and space to chat with everybody. So what if somebody has no idea what I'm talking about? What are some of the things that you offer there?
Yeah, so it's pretty low. It's a Ko-fi, which is really similar to Patreon. The lowest tier is $3 a month, and with that, you get access to our monthly new moon circles. We do tarot readings, guided meditations, and there's a Discord server. And then the frequency of those things goes up if you get the $8 tier and the 22 level tier. Um, and there's also like discounts, like sometimes I'll have yoga asana flows. All the people in the Ko-fi get free membership or free attendance to those. So yeah, there's a lot. There's like something to keep you busy for sure.
Very cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I always
And
like being able to find witchcraft community online.
yes, I know it feels a little less intimidating than having to find it like out in the world.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's what it is. I think that's why I like the online version is that like it's easier to,
Yeah.
jump in, see if it's a fit. If not, just like sort of ghost out of there. And that's much harder to do in person.
Yeah, you can't just leave the room in
Right.
person as easily as you can on Zoom.
Absolutely. And even in Chicago, there's like a ton of in-person, meetup
Mm.
things and options, but it's hard to find that right one and be able to like try out a bunch of different things. So it's nice to be able to find community online.
Yeah, I find so much comfort in it. I think COVID really brought out my introverted tendencies. So I know a lot of people really like in-person gatherings, but I really like online gatherings.
Me too. Which is, I like that you have that, new moon circle. That's fun.
It is really fun. And actually, I wanted to mention our first one is free now. So we want people to be able to try it out before they pay for
Oh, that's so nice of you. Kind of you guys.
it. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So, do you have any tips for people who are looking to find community and how to, even online, like be more comfortable with that?
Mm, I think that's a good question. I think what's been most helpful for me and what I've seen others do that's been really successful is you have to make the invitation. Um, so if you want an online community, sometimes you have to make it with your friend, or if you really want someone to celebrate the Sabbats with or the solstices with, sometimes it's asking people around you if they'd want to do something with you. Or if you really want to celebrate your birthday in a specific way, instead of waiting for someone to invite you, you often have to make the invitation. And I think a lot of us kind of wait for the invitation when we just need to be making it.
Good point.
I know, and it's hard to do too.
It is. I do feel like that can sometimes scare people off, but
Mhm.
it ends up being worth it in the end.
Yes, I noticed in my friend group, which is where I feel a lot of belonging and community. I was at first the one who was like, let's get dinner, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And I started worrying, like, am I being too pushy? Am I asking too many times? And then everyone told me individually, no, when you ask, it makes me feel so included and so loved. And now I've noticed that they are doing the asking probably half the time. So I think it kind of role models other people to make the invitation as well.
I agree with that. My friends call me cruise director because I just tell them I plan things and I tell them when and where to show up.
Yep.
But I have I am extroverted and I have relatively introverted friends.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's how that happens. Like they've all been like, we just got adopted by you. I was like, yeah, that's accurate. So I will just plan something like I'll see an event someplace, like something that looks fun, or I feel like we haven't like been out for like cocktails in a long time, and I just like plan it and I pick a spot and I'm like,
Mm.
okay, we're doing this here. They're like, okay, and they all show up. So it ends up working.
Yes. It's easier than being like, well, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go?
Yeah, I don't do that. I am an excellent decision maker too. I have a lot of friends that will like waffle back and forth, and I just make the choice for them. I'm like, I love to make decisions. I'm fine with it.
That's so
But
funny.
I do understand that they feel they appreciate that I do that work. I mean, they make fun of me with like the name like cruise
Mhm.
director, but they appreciate that I'm the one doing it, so they don't have to. So I mean, that's
Yes.
always an option if that like applies to witchcraft too and community. If you are that person,
Mm.
and you have that sort of energy, other people will appreciate that out of you.
Yeah, and my friends aren't really into witchcraft either, but if I say like I'd really like to celebrate the spring equinox by doing this, this, and this, do you want to come? Usually they'll say yes, and they might not do that when they get home, but usually they're like down to celebrate spring, you know?
Yeah. I think I have non-witchy friends too that are like usually like around the Sabbaths, they're like, yeah, I'll try that. Like you're offering me themed food and drinks. I will attend that.
Yeah, that's usually all it is.
That's all I do for the Sabbath. So I'm like, I'm not having a Christmas party, I'm having a Yule party. However, they are basically the same thing. So please attend. You will enjoy
Aw.
it. They're like, okay, yes.
Yeah, it's gonna feel like Christmas, but we're calling it something else.
Exactly.
Oh, I had a Yule party this year too, and it felt so empowering to call it that. And I tried my best to acknowledge that I was celebrating Yule and the winter solstice, not necessarily Christmas.
Oh, I love that. So that's my favorite holiday.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's so beautiful.
My favorite to celebrate for sure.
Aw.
So when it comes to herbalism and the things that you've been like growing and learning this year, have you been able to find community around that, or did you have to create it yourself?
You know what? I'm still in the beginning of that process. I've looked on Meetup a lot and tried to see are there any other herbalists in the area? I go to the herb store a lot, so I talk to them a lot. And I know there are some classes I could join that I think would just be fun. But yeah, I think financially I'm just not like ready to do that investment. So yeah, I don't know. What about you? Have you found ways to find herbalism friends online or in person?
You know, sometimes I can convince my friends to do something with me, whether they are witchy or not.
Mm,
And I sort of push them down the herbalism path, but they like benefit because they want like whatever herb blend that it is. So like I can convince them to like come over to my house and do things with me. But
mm.
as far as somebody else who, considers themselves an herbalist or wants to make stuff, I have not found that, but I don't think I have like looked that hard. So maybe I would, but since it's always just, I feel comfortable in my kitchen. I know how things work here and I know that I have like the tools
Hmm.
that I want. I feel like it would need to be people that I would feel comfortable inviting to my house anyway.
That's true. That's true. I have done the like just kind of pushing people down for the ride. Like I made some salves for my partner's family, and I was like, "Hey, and if you like it, you could come over and I could teach you how to make it." But I would like what you said, like a mentor kind of person who has already made the things that I'm curious about. Although I will say, like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you're not really in community with them. But you can usually find someone who knows more than you, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is very true. And I do like finding that. That's why I love being online and learning. I mean, at some point, I think everything that I do, somebody knows more than me. I'm not an expert in
Yeah,
anything.
I know. I know. It can be addicting too.
It really is. That's accurate.
But that's a good, I'm going to actually reflect on that because it wouldn't be hard to make a Facebook group or a meetup group or something simple to maybe gather online and talk about it.
And speaking of talking about it and just some important things to sort of keep in mind, because we touched a little bit on it, but we talked about the positive like fun sides of herbalism and doing like little things, easy herbs to work with, but there can be some negative. So I want to make sure that we cover that as far as making sure that you are going about this ethically. Like you touched on that a little bit, but I would
Mhm.
love if you have any tips for people getting started of like how they can ethically work with herbs and keep themselves safe at the same time.
Yes, that's such a great question. Yeah, I think always, if you're taking a medication, always checking to see if it's going to interact. For example, a common one is St. John's wort. People will use that for depression, but it can actually interfere with your birth control, and it can also interfere with antidepressants or anti-anxieties. So things you might not think of might be affected by the herb. And that's just because plants are so powerful. A lot of people tend to be like, oh, it's herbal, so you can just kind of do whatever. But they are really powerful and they do have strong effects on our bodies. And so we always want to check if that's going to be okay. If we have a certain disorder or issue or medical issue, we always want to make sure that that's going to mesh well with the herb that we're taking. It never hurts, of course, to check in with someone who is a medical provider. Sometimes they don't know a lot about herbs, so you might have to do a lot of your own research. Let's see what else. I also think that there's kind of this, maybe sometimes, idea around herbalism that it's always the solution to everything, or that we should trust it more than Western medicine. And I definitely understand the mistrust of medicine, and I know why that's there. But I think we kind of have to have a balance where we are open to Western medicine and seeking a provider when our herbs aren't really cutting it for us. And maybe like, how can we work with both of them instead of just one or the other?
That is great advice. And I think it's maybe trending in the direction of doctors being a little more understanding. So it might be, a question of finding the right doctor for you that will be open to your herbal remedies as well. But, finding that doctor might take some time, but you should always, in my opinion, be honest with your doctor about what you are taking or considering taking, because they can either tell you right away if it's a good idea or not, or they have access like immediately on their computer. They could like pull it up, how does this herb interact with the drug and research it for you right there in their office. They have access to all kinds of databases that will tell them right away if they don't know what it is. But a lot of times, like especially in this day and age, they do know. So if you are saying like, oh, I'm topically applying this essential oil, they will be able to tell you if that's a good idea or a bad idea, like right off the bat. So you should always be honest. If you're going to take something, you are taking something, even if you think it's just herbal and not going to affect anything, or that it's natural, so it's fine. Like your doctor still needs to know those things.
Yeah. And I think on the same page, we touched on it already too, but making sure you know where your supplements are coming from, or if it's possible, seeing how cost efficient it would be to make your own. Like, can you just buy the herb that you're trying to supplement? Because a lot of the times you could buy like a holy basil capsule on Amazon and it might not be holy basil, or it might be like half holy basil, half some other thing. So just using a lot of discernment in your supplements, or anything else that you're buying, really.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with the ethical question as well. Is to, if you know where your things are being sourced, then you know how that they are treating the plants, the land, how it's being harvested, how the workers are being treated that are harvesting those plants, whether or not it's sacred to a different culture outside of your own, whether you should even be touching that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me think of white sage, especially. I know when I got really into witchcraft, spirituality stuff, I was all about burning white sage all the time. And then I realized that's actually probably not so ethically good. So knowing if it's a closed practice or a sacred herb, like you said, is really good.
I think it's important. And you know what? You're finding all of that stuff is like fortunately readily available online. So don't let us like scare you. Like, oh, there's so much to like learn and things. Like all of this information is readily available online. And I will have like a couple of books and things linked where I recommend looking all of this up. And I will have places that I source my herbs that I know are ethically sourced. So I will share those as well. But don't let us like scare you, because all of this information is like one quick Google search. It'll be like the top 2 results will tell you everything that you need to know.
Yeah, someone's already done the like analysis and breakdown and investigation. You just have to look at it.
Right. Yeah. All that legwork is out there, which, it's goes along with the fact of just like choose one at a time. There's no need to try to learn 25 different herbs in a week and know the ins and outs of like all about them. Like just pick one that calls to you. Like chamomile was a great example. That's like such a great one. Just like focus on that. and learn all you can about that.
Yeah, my mother-in-law got me a box for Christmas that comes once a month for 3 months, and that's what they say too, that just focus on one herb at a time, work on the energy, see what you can do with it, see what it does for you, and then the next month go to the next herb. That's definitely not what I did. But I think it's a good idea.
Because it's so exciting when you like first get started and you find, because I think witchcraft in general, there's like so much trial and error of like finding what
Mm,
speaks to you and what you like and don't like, because there's just so much that seems interesting when you're first getting started.
yeah,
And then when you
yes.
do find something that you like, you're like dive in head first, like wholeheartedly, buy all of the herbs, like trying to just
Yeah,
rein it in a little bit.
I know. I think I want to be like an apothecary day one. It's like, no, 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 you could take your time.
You can grow into that. Definitely not saying you can never be an apothecary.
Right.
Like you absolutely could, but that's something you grow into rather than adopt over by it.
Yeah. I know, it's funny.
And
Two
we are both,
perfectionists.
yeah, we are both speaking from experience. So
Yeah.
let us be the example of what not to do.
Yeah, don't burn yourself out.
Well, that is everything that I wanted to cover today. Unless you had any last pieces of advice that you would like to give anyone listening.
Let's see, I made some notes. I think that all is what I was going to say. I did have a little note that said buying tea from the store is still herbalism. It's okay to purchase things. You don't have to make everything that you use. So you can still buy things just because you like herbalism.
Oh, that is such a good tip to end on, because we talked all about like growing things and making things yourself. But you're
Yeah.
right. It absolutely counts as herbalism if you buy it.
Yeah, you can just go to Target and get your tea box, and that's still practicing herbalism.
Baby steps, all about the baby steps.
Yes, yes.
And
Yeah.
doing what, works for you and is accessible to you, because not everybody is going to live in a place that has all of these herb shops or witchy stores.
Mm,
So if that's
hmm.
not accessible to you, then it's okay to source things from the grocery store. Like tons of tea at the grocery store.
Oh, yeah, and tons of herbs too at the grocery store.
Oh yeah, all kinds of herbs and spices. There's tons in
Yeah.
like the fresh section and the produce section. There's rosemary and everything.
Hmm.
It's great.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, that is everything that we have for you this week. Sam, thanks so much for being here again and sharing your update.
Yay! Thank you so, so, so much for having me. This was so awesome.
And listeners, as always, I will have everything linked in the show notes over at witchwednesdays.com. And I will see you next week.
Need even more? Subscribe to Patreon and YouTube for exclusive bonus content. Order a themed witchcraft box every month through Witch Wednesdays on Etsy. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. Find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.